Call this meeting to order and welcome everyone, one and all, to the council meeting. Work session this evening. We have one item, which is legislative priorities. Can I have a roll call, though?
Councillor Dahlman. Councillor Fisher.
Here.
Councillor Hunter.
Here.
Councillor Nunnally.
Here.
Councillor Carlson. Here. Councillor Gabrielle. Councillor Graham.
Here.
Councillor Dowd.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here. All right. Legislative priorities. Do we start this with an all hail Greg, or do we just start with legislative priorities?
However you prefer.
Oh, go ahead and you can jump in. We'll do the hail Gregs later.
So for the last few legislative sessions, we've actually established our specific legislative priorities to kind of be the guide that provides for, how we as a body or individually respond to questions on behalf of the city. And last time around in 2023, we established the 8 priorities that were identified in the packet. And so just as a starting place for this next upcoming session, I just provided those as a draft. Really just going down briefly in a little history on them. The local option sales tax is one we've advocated for, just not necessarily in favor of passing one here locally, but at least giving our community the option to determine where they want to go as a community and how they want to revolve around the discussion of a local option sales tax. In here, either providing the local communities that option or adjusting the population rate, our population threshold that's in there. And again, just as a matter of giving the community that choice if it ever got to that point. Next one down, tax increment financing. There's always been seemingly an attack on tax increment financing at the legislative session for various reasons. So, we've always had that in the platform of maintaining that. Special district legislation really stemmed from the legislature putting additional regulation on creation of special districts several years ago, and it first kind of reared up when went out for a 911 emergency district. Again, this was before it passed last time around, but all the components they put with it actually made it very confusing for property owners. When the county did the mailing to try and create a special district, it looked like a ballot. It wasn't. It was just an opportunity for to protest, essentially. So it was very confusing. Do hear that they're going to try and limit special districts into the future during this session. So maybe apropos to keep that in. Environmental quality, again, legislation to mitigate the impacts of unfunded liabilities caused by increasing standards. We've seen numerous of those over the years. Public infrastructure assistance. Can support legislation assist in areas of local infrastructure related to growth and development. The public resource management, I think the next 3 were added in last session. And just to support legislation provides for the effective use and management of land resources, including forest lands, use of the public right-of-way, and land use regulations associated with development. Service delivery, again, supports legislation that enhances our ability to provide services throughout all areas of municipal operations. And the last one was affordable housing. The city supports legislation that provides funding sources and programs that facilitate the development of affordable housing and affordable housing initiatives. We also did include the league's resolutions. That's how you go over those, but can answer any questions if we have any related to those. So really, kind of just setting this out for the council's deliberation. If you want to stick with these 8, if you want to remove some, add some to it, kind of that's the purpose of this work session tonight. Once we have a general idea on a platform, we'll bring it back for formal adoption at a regular meeting in the future. But for here is just to kind of identify where council wants to go as a body related to these, to the legislative platform from the city.
comments, thoughts on, I mean, a lot of this kind of carry over from years prior. It's a lot of consistency there. I guess the only question I have for council is, I mean, very general statements, but, you know, what we continue to see, I mean, the league even supported it, is really just kind of a continual erosion of the ability for municipalities to make decisions on their own behalf. And it sounds like the Senate's going to take some really good whacks at us again. I just wonder, you know, you think about, was it 819? Is it 819?
Yeah.
When you look at 819, the commissioners, it sounds like they're just going to let that die a death. They're not even going to act on it. They're just going to let it die by the end of the year and not even take a vote on giving us access to that housing, the money for affordable
HB
housing through that
819,
process. And so one of the things that I look at is, I mean, I know Greg hates cities, but I mean, the legislature doesn't all necessarily hate the municipalities. My question is, do we look at and try to encourage the legislature to look to the cities, not the counties, to try to solve some of these housing problems? Because counties, they don't really pursue housing strategies to try to meet the needs. They're just, it'd be, as we say, 56 contracts to manage programs, but we really look at the problem in the big 7 cities especially. Is there a way to take the first-class cities of Kalispell, see if the legislature, anything that they do to help for housing can be targeted at the city level to where we partner with the state versus the county level? Because partnering with the county is, in my opinion, in Flathead County is worthless. It just isn't going to go anywhere. Just as a thought, just one of those things that I kick out. Mr. Dowd?
I don't know what the stats are here, but it would be interesting to find out the number of units built within the city of Kalispell versus the number of units built in the county outside of a city. Because if we can show that we are the major contributor, it'll go a little bit farther for us speaking up and saying, you know, cities are taking care of this with the limited resources that we have. Why don't you just give those resources right to the cities?
Well, and I would agree with that, and I think maybe another way to take that a step further is, I mean, obviously we always look at everything from our perspective as being in Flathead County. We don't really look at, you know, the perspective of how things operate in Yellowstone County, Missoula County, other places around the state. But for us, we know what our makeup is, and we try to go through and have a lot of the development happen within the city to stop that urban sprawl. So you want to go through and get some of that high density into the city, also so that you can connect to water treatment, sewer treatment, water, you know, sources, instead of punching more wells, more septics, all out in the county. Like, the more and more you do out in the county, there are going to be larger parcels and everything. And that there's a purpose for that. But I don't know that it actually goes and actually hits the spirit of affordable housing. So yeah, when it kind of comes down to being targeted at the county level, I'm not really quite sure why that is, because you're going to have more density inside any of the municipalities around the state. So I'm not really quite sure why that was targeted to go to counties instead of to the municipalities. To go and I say if it goes through and happens within a city, you're getting the biggest bang for your buck by getting it, you know, for more density. So, you know, I see that on here as for affordable housing, and then, you know, like what you're talking about, Your Honor, is that program would probably fit underneath that. I think is what you're referring to is that bullet point. So, you know, just my thoughts. I don't know where it fits. I don't know where it
They
fits
can
in any
amend it and
discussion.
say
But
if the county doesn't pick it up, a municipality has the opportunity to maintain and manage that program under that state, something that could maybe be amended. But I think there's got to be something there, because we just see so much passing out of salmon. And
Well, I'm as I read that affordable housing earlier today, I almost wonder if we need to have that as affordable and attainable, because For some reason, affordable has just been hijacked into something totally different, and so I don't know if that would help that at all by adding attainable to it also. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it's just adding verbiage, but
Yeah, I mean, affordable is kind of the common nomenclature, but you look at it and affordable is all in the eye of the beholder.
correct.
So you can look at how do we make something, what programs can be used that takes existing stock and makes it attainable or reachable. So, Sid?
I don't want to limit us to just meeting the criteria of the state's definition of affordable housing. I'd rather that we looked at meeting the demand that we have on housing, whether it's affordable workforce or, regular housing. That way we're not, if we go and pass this in council, if we see something that we want to jump on and support or something we want to fight, and if it's outside of the realm of affordable housing, we can still do that.
So one thought, you just strike affordable from it and just put housing.
Housing.
There you go.
Then it's the entire spectrum.
I like that better.
Yeah. I'm not saying that we disregard affordable housing.
Oh, no,
but-
no,
Yeah,
because we had taken
Yeah,
advantage of any
part of it.
opportunity that does emerge.
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Just like, they put workforce housing in TIF statutes. Council has now passed that as an initiative. If there is another component, and it'll come up in the 382 development, different levels of housing at different sectors. So for the platform, we could just say housing. And that's all levels and opens up the wide spectrum. Takes away the question of, well, what do you mean by affordable housing? Well,
Yeah.
we mean housing.
Yeah,
I
I
think-
like that.
I think that's the unfortunate part about the debate around this is, I'm fine with all that. But affordable, semantics of, and saying attainable housing is, to me, there's different flavors of affordable housing. But we're always trying to invent a new way to talk about it because people start associating with low-income housing, and there's a lot of prejudice and bias around that. So then everybody's trying to invent ways to talk about it in a way to not be referring to low-income housing and other things, which I think is really unfortunate because we all need housing, whether we're low-income or workforce or whatever, and there's different flavors, and it could all fall under affordable housing, but because people are sensitive about that, we can play the word game.
Yeah. Well, we've
And
been
with-
playing a lot of word games for
With the
years.
makeup of the legislature, we're probably gonna have to do that. So,
Yeah. Anything else in there that?
I have a couple of things, and I've mentioned a few of these before. One on the sales tax. I think I've mentioned I personally am opposed to a general sales tax, but I do support a resort tax. And so in this language, I personally would prefer delivering that message to the community that might be reading this, that we are not going to be implementing a general sales tax, or we don't want the legislature to give us the ability to do a general sales tax. And the reason for me for that is that a general sales tax shifts the tax burden from wealthier people with property to lower income people who spend a greater share of their income buying things. And so it's a shift downward. Whereas a resort tax is putting that tax burden, of course, on the visitors.
But this is resort.
Well, but that's what I'm saying is the language in here. It says, a local option sales tax, which could be a general sales tax, or increasing the population limit of the current resort tax, which is what I would support.
But it's all the same.
It's all the same.
Right,
But
and I'm
local
saying that,
option is a resort tax.
but
Resort tax is a local option sales tax.
but isn't a local option also could be a general sales tax?
General sales is statewide.
Statewide, yeah.
But couldn't you do a local general sales tax?
By definition of sales, like a lot of resort taxes, they collected only for a certain part of the season. some collect, like Whitefish is year round.
Right.
It's a general sales tax year round.
No,
But there are
because,
certain things exempted.
right,
But what that does is it was a local option. It's up to the local, once again, it's up to the local community to say, we craft that sales tax to be on these items and here's the parameters so we can very specifically frame it for our community.
right. But you,
So.
you could also do a local option sales tax that doesn't exempt anything, and it's on all sales in the
Oh, you
community.
could, yeah, but
Yeah,
that, you
and
could,
I'm just saying that in our language, we might want to make clear that
Yeah.
that's not what we're
and I
asking.
think what the resort sales tax was approved because it was specifically crafted only to benefit Whitefish and,
Certain population,
what was
West
the other-
Yellowstone.
yellow, yeah.
Yellows, yeah. So it was only two communities really that they targeted that sales tax for. So they called it a resort sales tax, but it's a local option sales tax. It's all one and the same.
And now Columbia Falls.
Yeah. And
But
now
the
Columbia
part,
Falls.
the part about that being, the local option, driven by, voters is kind of what it gets at to what you're talking about, that it can be, it's kind of like a menu if you want to call it that, but it goes towards certain things. And I think maybe what you might be referring to as just a general tax would be all things. But with the resort tax, it goes and is applied to certain aspects of, the economy, I guess you'd
Right.
say.
The
Whereas
restaurants, the bars,
it probably be more along the things that tourists hit.
Right.
To go and get that impact that they create. It's user pay. I look at local option as user pay. And right now we have a lot of people coming through Kalispell that
Don't pay.
Right.
you have the entire population of Kalispell footing the bill for all of the tourism and
All the county.
and
All the county too.
well, the county, that's another component of it. Be from everybody coming in from the county and other cities and whatnot. But I just kind of wonder, how long. I'm always going to go through and respect what our voters would want to go through and say on that. The problem is they don't even have the opportunity to say yes or no on that. And I think we're getting to a point with the way things have been happening with property taxes, where I would think a lot of people would say, okay, yeah, enough is enough. We got to go through and start having people that are placing this impact on us pay for some of the impact that they're doing. So that's why I would support that
And I
being on there.
I totally agree with that. I'm just saying that because a sales tax that goes beyond that would be so charged that we would want language in here that would make clear that we are talking about the impact on the tourists, the bars, the restaurants, the hotels. We're not talking about grocery store food items at Smith's or Super One. We're not talking about back to school items at Target, to kind of make clear what we're asking for.
Yeah, and I think what we're looking at here is just, we see some proposal in Helena, we're gonna wanna jump on board and try to craft, no matter
Try to
how it
look at it.
goes.
Yep.
So that, I'm okay with the language because I know what it is. But I don't wanna just limit it to not only resort tax. We would craft, the voters of Kalispell would help craft what it's gonna be and what it would look like. And so I'm comfortable with this because I think we need to be a little more broad on this. Because one, it'll have a snowball's chance of hell in Helena anyway, because they're doing just the opposite in everything we see them doing. They don't trust the cities. And so they just keep trying to pull more power up to Helena. And you see it, it's insidious cancer, taking away local government ability and local citizens' ability to craft their future at the community level. It's going to be more of just a homogenous, the world according to All Hail Greg, is what we're moving to. So I'm okay with this being general, because if there's anything out there, it's like, boy, I'd rather see it and be able to jump on it and try to craft and work towards it. But it's really going to be, anything is going to be tailored after. The legislators are lazy. they're gonna look at what else is out there. Let's just let's move the population limit up. What's Kalispell's population? 27,000? Great, we'll go 26,000 and hey, have fun, guys. So I think we're good with that, but, I mean, I get it, but what you're getting to is more of the weeds of what we would craft at the local level, what we would talk to the community about crafting. Because what I'm hoping is, at the state level, they leave us with a little more freedom to craft what we want.
I just think the paper's going to report on what we pass, and this is going to be the language, and
Yeah.
I worry about that, the impression left with our residents. But I'll move on. The other one, and I mentioned this before, but I'll just mention it again, on the resource management. I'd like to see the inclusion of the word sustainable. And I know last time I brought this up a couple of years ago, it was kind of mentioned that, well, sustainable, what does that mean? It can mean different things, different people. I would argue that the term effective use in that paragraph, the same thing could be said about that. What does that mean? I think there could be difference of opinions there. In terms of management of land resources, I think, balance should be struck of making sure it's done well and responsibly and with ecology in mind. So kind of capturing that with the use of the word sustainable management there would be helpful.
Just a question on that, is a gravel pit sustainable?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about it.
Because we need gravel pits.
We
We're
do
gonna
need
have
gravel
development,
pits,
we need
exactly.
gravel pits.
And so the
Okay.
question is, where are they located? And what's the water quality control on them in terms of the impacts on
Oh.
groundwater systems?
Oh, a great gravel pit that pulls it right out of the Flathead River.
So it's like, if we have gravel pits that have no regulatory control, that's not sustainable, right? So, yeah, it depends on what the regulations are around them.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get hung up on what's that definition of sustainable and where does that,
What's the definition of effective use? I mean, you could do that on a lot of these things, and I mean, the point of these are kind of general statements, so you can kind of argue that point on any of them. But I think sustainability is an important enough issue that it's worth a word drop there.
Why does it seem to me like we're so reactive on what's introduced instead of proactive? There's been several comments, what is introduced and what we will support. Why aren't we being more proactive, especially the larger cities, instead of so reactive all the time? In your statement of the commissioners will let something die a natural death instead of us trying to work with them sooner than waiting till a certain.
no, we're working, we're putting pressure on.
Okay, but overall, it seems like we're reactive to everything.
And I think overall, the big part is crafting that, seeing what gets thrown out. And a lot of times they'll put in placeholders with names. They don't have anything written. So you look at the placeholders with names to see what are they going to target.
I get that.
And then you go, okay, who put that out? Then you start making those phone calls and start talking. So a lot of it is done just on the phone as that session's going, with burning up cell minutes, talking to them.
But my point is the cell minute should be now to,
So the question I would ask is, okay, what's the bill you want to introduce and try and get supported?
well,
There's one by this council, we can do that. We did it when we changed the review of impact fees. I think it was a 2-year review, and we put legislation, or requested legislation forward, worked with local people to do it till a 5-year review period. It just made more practical sense. So if there's legislation that council wants to push, you have that ability to be proactive in that fashion. Creating a platform just gives us the opportunity, when we see legislation come forward, to respond to it. Basically, I can go down there and use this platform and find within these guidelines, speak to it. Without that authority, I won't speak to it.
I understand that.
But there are things to do proactively, and that's, part of that's watching what hits that bill register and listening and talking about what's coming. Because a lot of times with with the legislature, we are playing defense because you're looking at something going, oh my God.
I totally understand that as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jed, along that line of proactive, because you kind of hit where I've been thinking about all day on it. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is, what is our industry here? Our industry is tourism with healthcare. What am I missing?
Manufacturing, housing.
Agriculture.
All things that are
Tech.
not necessarily going to be sustaining to us, right, long time. I mean, that can change quickly. So how can we find those things that
Or some timber.
we can get ahead of that to be the proactive? And with that, we're not going to get big industry here if we don't make changes with our child care. We're not going to get big industry here if we try to totally, completely, 100% to eliminate Medicare, Medicaid, any of that. I think those are some of the things that I get really worried about as we talk about legislative coming forward and being proactive. What are those other things, right? Tech is a great one, right? Our tech influence, we have some great tech companies, but I tell you, we're missing the boat. We've got hydroelectricity dam up here that produces the cleanest energy you're going to get anywhere for a data center. That's why Google, all the big data centers go next to hydroelectric dams, because it's the cleanest power you can get. Right next to that is BPA transmission lines, and what runs on a BPA transmission line is the number one thing that BPA makes money off of is not power. The number one thing that BPA makes their money off of is dark fiber, and that dark fiber runs directly straight glass from here to the Dalles, Oregon, where Big Eddy Salilo substations sit for all of the generation of the Columbia drainage, which includes Hungry Horse Dam. But what also sits there is about 5 or 6 huge data centers for Facebook, Google, Amazon, all the major companies. I think we're sitting prime if we can figure out ways to attract those type of true tech business, large tech companies, right, that we might be able to do here. Because we do sit in an area where, I tell you what, for efficiency of a data center, if you're trying to keep it maintained at a cool temp, this is a great place. And then to have fiber directly back to the core of a lot of this, I think if we can find that, there's a proactive way, but we've got to hit the health care, make sure we maintain that. We've got to maintain child care. So if that's what I've been trying to put together all day is how do we be proactive? And you said it perfectly.
Well, so right now, if you wanted to introduce a bill, you find your sponsor, it should be finalized and being reviewed right now.
Correct.
And then by the 1st of December or real close to that, you want to have it submitted to the state for legal review. So if we wanted to do something, we're really behind the ball right now on actually introducing a bill. But, we could find legislators that are starting to craft and are ready to turn in bills that we support and say, hey, would you consider tweaking it like this? And this would be the benefit to, your city that, your district is in, so.
No, and that's looking at because there's a lot of those, we're starting to see the titles show up.
I'm sorry, you didn't hear that.
Starting to see the titles of the bills show up.
I would agree with Sam on the Medicare, Medicaid, and the child care. I think that's important. I support bullets on both of those. And with Medicaid in particular, having a support for extension of the expansion of Medicaid, because, losing that years ago was a big contributor to our mental health facilities closing locally and having that spike of mentally ill homeless folks on our streets. And so again, that extension of that expansion has an important impact for us locally with our local homeless population and the troubles we've been seeing on the streets from that. I will say, in terms of the data centers, I think probably a bigger component of that to the hydro, less they're concerned about clean energy and more about it being cheap. And the risk there, I mean, certainly investment in jobs, but they are massive energy sucks. So we might find that all of a sudden we have a shortage of electricity locally if we bring in those data centers because they just suck up everything in terms of energy.
That's why they're gonna,
But I
a
think
lot of them are doing their own little,
the bigger point I was trying to get out of that wasn't necessarily just that. I mean, that's one point, but as a community, I think it's time we actually honestly start having those hard discussions of, okay, what do we count as industry? We're not gonna get something where we manufacture, because we're nowhere near an interstate, right? And our train service isn't as reliable as everybody thinks it is out of the Flathead. So we've gotta find something that's going to be an industry that's gonna keep these jobs here, because all it's gonna take is a change in tourism or something, and we're gonna.
So what's the legislative priority that you're?
And and I don't know that there's I think all of this stuff that's on here is part of that. And so I don't even know that having that discussion at this point would be it, but I think
yeah. to
somehow
me,
as a
it's-
community, we need to do that, not legislative, but
It's a community conversation. You gotta have some commissioners that are committed to being in economic development.
right.
I don't know if they're there.
And there's a gap. I mean, our industry used to be forestry,
Exactly.
right? And that's basically gone away. It's very limited right now compared to what it was. And we didn't fill it with anything other than tourism, which is very fickle because, you know, as the economy takes a dive, less people travel, right? So we can't. So your boom years are all years that you're good anyway, and your bad years are years that you're hurting, right? So diversifying would be great. I think we need to have that community discussion, but you're right. It's got to be all the cities and the commissioners talking about that, and having the community invited.
Well, and Brian brought up a good point about mental health. I think we got to put and keep talking about that. I know they had the 300 million that they did the statewide thing for, but I think that's just the start.
Yeah.
I think it's probably, I'm looking at all this stuff on here. To me, it's probably the number one thing that I would say should be hit the hardest, because it's the one thing that's going to be the hardest to do.
And it impacts everybody
It
through
impacts-
the community equal. I mean,
Everybody, and you know, when we had Mr. Keenan here speaking about it, I was a little taken away that it didn't also go and have drug addiction as a part of the component part of that, because drug addiction can go and manifest itself or turn into the mental health issues. And it seems to me like the drug addiction part, it would be the low hanging fruit to kind of stop from getting into some of the mental health problems that we see. So, glad you brought that up, because I had forgotten about it. So, I think it's a big deal.
add in.
I think you could really use the same wording under affordable housing. We put City of Kalispell supports legislation that provides funding sources and programs that facilitate the development of mental and behavioral health programs and initiatives.
Perfect.
Perfect.
This is where I'll use the word sustainable. Programs that facilitate, sustainable, because I don't want a one shot and done,
Right.
or, oh, we got a budget problem, cut mental health again, because that's what the Wonder Twins did last time they were down there.
Which has been cut since 2016, right?
17.
17.
17.
Yep. So. Other thoughts, other questions? Mr. Russell, I went through the league stuff, and I see things that to me are just so inconsistent or duplicitous that it just drives me nuts that I question why I even belong to the League of Cities and Towns anymore.
Amen.
Oppose any measure that limits or diminishes municipal authority as provided by the letter and spirit of the local government article of the 1972 Montana Constitution. Okay, number 9. Strategically sponsor and support legislation or policies that maintain and strengthen local decision-making and authority, and oppose legislation or policies that seek to undermine or weaken local decision-making and authority. Number 10, support or sponsor legislation, policies, and funding that improve the ability of local governments to provide public access to their deliberations, decision-making, and records. And I look at what Kelly helped craft and the league
Against all of it.
crafted, and it's like, my God, you guys were in just direct contravention to what you say in 7, 8, and 10. And the excuse is, well, we had to pass something because they were going to do something. It's like, well, let's see, Mark, you're going to be hung at noon for this crime. Oh, well, I'll just cut my throat ahead of time because I'm going to die anyway. I mean, this is ridiculous when I read this. Do they do anything that benefits us when it comes to working in Helena during the I just have no faith or trust in anything they do anymore.
Weren't they supposed to be giving us a briefing?
Okay, so we had a briefing scheduled,
Uh-huh,
and they canceled.
uh-huh.
Then I came back and asked council if they wanted to reschedule, and the decision was no.
Yeah.
So that's why we brought these forward. So in terms of your question, which is a fair question, I would say we will get value in the legislative process through the one, actually, honestly, and it's an appropriate topic, is information on bills that are coming through. Because last year was a record number of last session was a record number of bills. I anticipate the same this coming year. Everyone that works for the city of Kalispell has a full-time job. We cannot maintain and keep up with that. We do not hire a lobbyist. I do not recommend hiring a lobbyist during this session. I don't think it'd be a wise use of resources. A lot of municipalities are, council can have that discussion. I just think that it's not gonna have a big impact to have an isolated lobbyist from the city of Kalispell. That's just my own perspective. But a lobbyist would be able to keep us much more in tune with what is going on, what bills are coming up that impact it. Because I mentioned this halfway through last year when the bills just kept coming. Look, we just cannot keep up. The league has that platform and has the resources out there that are keeping track of that. So while we may disagree with a specific resolution or a specific position that the league is taking on a bill, we also have to remember they represent the entire community of cities and towns across the state, not just one entity. And so in terms of what I would get value out of this session is just that information flow, because I cannot go through 4,000 bills, digest them all.
Oh, come on.
Bring them to council. We will miss something.
Right.
And we were close last time to missing different bills that came forward. So that's the best answer I can give you to your question.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I would just say that, to add on that, and I think that was a good explanation, but, when our interests do align, and there is, say, a bill that we want to fight, and they want to fight, having them kind of coordinating that effort to fight it and pulling us in and saying, here's when the committee hearing is, we're going to have you speak, and then somebody from Missoula, and then somebody from Bozeman and stuff, that alone is probably worth the participation, even if sometimes they're fighting a bill or supporting a bill that we, wouldn't. There's value when the interests do align. That's probably pretty significant.
So I heard, so how many other of the big 10 cities are hiring lobbyists? Because I know Whitefish is talking, right?
Yeah, I would get them wrong if I tried to
Okay.
list them all out. Amy may have an idea, because I know there was a listserv going around. But I know typically you have, I think, Bozeman, Billings, Missoula, Whitefish. You may have others that have popped through.
Butte, let's see, who else? An email was actually going around today asking who all would be hiring. Let's see, we've got, oh, that's the wrong email. I need to wear my glasses a little bit more often.
That's why it enlarges
Mm-hmm.
those fingers.
Doesn't work on paper though.
I have an
try.
idea.
Far enough, but quite
As
a
a-
few, most of the large cities are
So I guess that,
Bozeman, Belgrade, Butte, Billings, Missoula.
that leads me into then the question of, okay, if they do align sometimes, how come so many others are finding alternative routes and relying on Montana League of Cities? That puts, in my book, Montana League of Cities in a weaker position. You know
guess
my
my-
feeling on this. I've said it for a while now, but
I mean, and I guess, and I understand, but on the flip side, we represent all cities. What do we pay for them now?
Our annual dues are maybe in 28,000,
28?
give or take.
And it was substantially less before that.
Yes. And part of that increase was due to increased information legislatively, to get more information back out to communities.
But they allocated that cost based on the size of the cities, correct?
Yeah,
So our interests might not align, but we're taking more money from you to do something that's gonna hurt you or go against something
it's smaller.
you as a municipality or as a council believe. That's where there is no one size fits all, and that's the frustrating part. And, yeah, I mean, I knew of 3 cities, I didn't realize there's more that were looking at lobbyists. To me, it's disconcerting that municipalities feel they have to pay the league and have them do it, and hire lobbyists
Right.
to protect local government, local decision-making from the big government Marxists that are sitting in Helena today. That's the sad statement and they all say, I'm a libertarian, I'm a Republican. No, you're not. You're making government bigger at the state level where it's less responsive and they can hide from us.
Yep.
So now as municipalities, we're spending 28 grand, and some cities are gonna spend another 25, 30 grand on, I'm guessing, on lobbyists. Taxpayer money, that's not money from the council members, that's taxpayer money to protect themselves from Helena, and I find that frustrating. Elections have consequences.
That's right.
So these cities are paying a lobbyist in addition to be members of the league?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
now, some may have specific legislation that they want to move forward. Some may just be to have one available if needed, like on a retainer type basis. I can't speak to each community's individual component, but yeah, it is definitely in addition to. If we had specific legislation that, we had been considering or wanted to do or look at that, then I could more reasonably suggest we go about it. Without something of that nature, well, a lobbyist would be able to keep us better informed. I will tell you that before the session starts. The amount of bills will be overwhelming from time to time. But hopefully we get that information from the league and have that there.
This
I
may,
guess kind of my thought is, as we look at this, what I really want to sit down after we get done with the legislative session, because once again, we're spending taxpayer money on the league. We get our money's worth or not? Do we feel like they're representing the interests of all cities in Montana? Ours? Are they listening to us? Because that's the other side. I think Mr. Russell last session, Mr. Nygren emailed a lot with them, and it was really kind of ignored.
Well, again, I would say, we've shared our input, just like on a governing body. 9 different opinions could be present at any point in time. You end up going with what that majority component is.
Right.
We did express some concerns related to 382, specifically around participation. Was a primary thing. We know how 382 ended up, where all that is moved up to the front.
Yep.
We did express concerns related to that in the voice of the community. But again, the resolutions get passed, information goes to a board, and they make that decision. So as a representative democracy, I get that. It just comes to a point of what the council feels in terms of where you're at.
Doug, last session, when we had all those bills coming through, so the knowledge that we had of the bills and what they were, all the details for the bills, were we able to make any changes to those bills through the process of the league? Were we effective in that manner, or was it the benefit of that being that we saw what was coming? Were we effective in actually pressing any change on any of those that you can think of?
That's hard to identify. You had 382 as the overriding one, and then you had a lot of other bills in place too. And
Because I know that some of the stuff died, and then at the very end got resurrected again. There's the shell game that they play, and then it gets resurrected over in the other chamber or something. It comes back up and gets voted on real quick or something like that.
yeah, so it's just hard for me to say because, defining what change may have occurred, bills died. You're exactly correct, and we participated in some of those in providing input. The one thing I can say, and I'll try and leave the whole 382 and all the other housing bills to the side because I think there were strategies involved by different people in different areas and different sides to get different housing components in. But let's go to tax increment financing. I can say that the league probably has been beneficial in holding off potentially damaging changes that could have occurred. And this is going back the whole, since I've been here, every year it's tax increment financing. And this goes to Councilman Hunter's point of rallying the troops where, we're at a session with, maybe 50 opponents of the bill that they're putting forth to really push back on proposed legislation. And I do think that has been effective in that fashion.
I think if we were to kind of further this discussion at some point, I'd want to know what the cost of a lobbyist. I mean, if we're talking about replacing the league with a lobbyist, are we talking about equivalent
And
cost?
I think
or-
that's a future, that would be something to look at after the session, Mr. Kind of just as how effective were they? What was it cost effective? What would it cost for a lobby? Just to review it and look, is this worthwhile spending this money? Are our citizens' interests being served or disserved with what we're spending? And then we can make a decision. I mean, last session I thought was damaging. We'll see how this session is. The fact that, all these things are changing with input. To me, it's that input is critical. It helps shape some of the things that we do. It's helped shape some of the last subdivision. That wouldn't happen. That won't happen under 382. That's where I want to see what do they do this session, and then make an assessment.
And the other question I'd have, in addition to the cost question, is that issue of information. I found it nearly impossible to track. I mean, the number of bills is just insane. I don't even know how they do it. It's just in the amount of time they have and the amount of bills they're doing. And I imagine at the league, there's quite a few people working on this. If we replace the league with one lobbyist, are we really going to get that summation of information? I mean, I don't see how one person could track all that stuff. So maybe that's why other cities are relying both on the league and their own lobbyists. But to replace one with the other, I think we'd probably lose quite a bit in terms of that information coming back to us from what's going on in the legislature.
Like
Unless
Mark-
you got a firm,
Yeah, but I mean, that's like Mark Baker. He has a firm, so he has a number of people.
right?
I just think
Anyway, just
Another alternative, well, go ahead.
some of our other cities that are supposed to be in the league with us have completely different thought processes and desires than we do. I mean, it's not really a cohesive effort in the views of the bigger cities, the Big Ten. So that's the biggest problem right away. Is Missoula's much different than here, and Bozeman, it doesn't seem cohesive in our needs as the Big Ten at all.
Yeah, there's definitely some divergence of opinions, without a doubt. And that goes to, well, the majority of the board is what passes the resolutions that you see that have been established. And I think, and I can't remember, I think several people made the point. Yeah, I think some, when they go with a lobbyist, it's very specific, agenda-related matters that they may be looking at this change in state law. Some may be to take that broad 4,000 bills. Okay, what is the city really focused on? We do not want to miss this bill that gets under the radar. We want to catch it from the very beginning, keep an eye on it. Something that the league may not be doing at that in-depth of a level, which is why they may go out and get a lobbyist.
I know the last, 3 or 4 legislative sessions, you spent a lot of time driving back and forth to Helena. There was a few of them, like even when we were in DC, we gave testimony on a couple that were up before committees. And this is just an idea, and this may be something we can't even do, but if we are going to spend some time there, either supporting or fighting specific bills, it was very helpful for me in another role when I was there for like a couple weeks sustained. We just got a VRBO and like sat there and we'd watch when these bills were happening, because you're right. Sometimes they die in a committee and then they get resurrected in this, like the other house. And you have to like really make a fast move to go up there and give a testimony. So, maybe we can consider just a little headquarters there that I could spend like the majority of the session there. Because I could work from Helena if I wanted to. But I know not everybody's in the same boat, and I also know that I am not the voice of everybody here. But I would think
We're
that
acknowledging that.
I would think that everybody here would be supportive of having a consensus for the council and then speaking to that, whether or not it's your own view, because you represent the council.
The other side of that, though, is if we know it's there, you can register for Zoom to make. Through Zoom comment was pretty efficient last time.
Yeah, I'd say the majority of comment last time was through Zoom participation. Don't know if it'll be as widely available this time. At the last chamber update, they were talking about some new software that are working the bugs out, and the online participation may or may not be as.
Are they going to do to themselves what they did to local government, and that's limit participation from the public so they can do what they want to do?
Yeah, as I said, there may be some challenges with the software and
Just from being
that they're
there,
trying to work out through.
Okay.
there's a lot of advantage of sitting in the hallway before everybody's let into the room, where you can discuss with the other people that are there what's going to happen. That's something you really miss out on with the Zoom testimony, but it was at least something we could do. But I being there and being on Zoom, kind of two different scenarios.
And I can honestly say, last session, calling in, Courtney Springer would call me back, Tony would call me back, John Fuller would call me back. Many of the others never would get a.
That's the advantage of being there. You can go get them. You can call them out of session to come talk to you.
Go corner them.
Yeah.
I will say, going to the league when we went down there to Helena, Chad and I went down with Doug and a couple others. There were some things that I certainly remember that I learned while I was down there. And if you asked me what they were, I couldn't tell you specifically except for one. And that was the very last day, the very last session. You remember his name? The director?
Yeah, I don't remember his name, no.
I don't remember his name either, but one of the directors from one of the departments down there gave a talk about 382. because most of the room was against 382. It was amazing how many other towns and cities were speaking against it. And when he got backed into that corner and said all of his talking points from Gianforte, he looked at Kelly and said, Kelly, would you tell them who drafted it? And it wasn't until that point that she stood up and we finally realized that, yes, she drafted it. And that's what I remember from that. And that's where it's like, oh, that hurts. Are they working for us?
Right.
And when I say us, I don't mean Kalispell. I mean Montanans.
Most cities are not happy with 382.
No.
Unless you don't like reading you never read a packet and you just show up and just like to, be at a meeting, do nothing. If you don't like, if you like being lazy, 382 is a great thing. Anything else?
Good conversation. Appreciate it. And so as we get into it, and I know we'll talk more when we put this up for passage, but as we get into bills that do pop forward, I'll do the same thing and look at what is the most effective and efficient use of our time and resources. If you make it down, you may get calls if whoever wants to join me on a trip down to Helena, we can do that. We can arrange, if we're calling in on Zoom, if we're in time frame, so it'll be a wide variety of those components. As far as the platform here, if it pleases the council, I will add in the mental and behavioral health position. I won't make any changes, even though it seemed like we had a general consensus on affordable housing, but I'll wait and let that be done with an amendment, if that's effective that way. Any changes to the draft is done through that, if everyone's agreeable to that. Because I suspect there'll be other wording changes. I know I will fix the typo. I did see one typo in there, and I'll change that one. But the rest will be predominantly like that, but I'll add in the bullet point on mental and behavioral health, and then council can make changes through the amendment process as desirable.
Do we want to add a bullet point on childcare to Sam's point? Like promotion and encouragement of, programs, funding, incentives for enhanced childcare in local communities.
So where the child care came up from was I had a constituent stop me this morning at Black Rifle Coffee, and we were talking, and it was one specific thing that kind of snowballed in my mind of why child care is so important, because we've been hearing the chamber talk about how important child care is and everything. His one specific thing was the green space requirement. In a city of a certain population where you don't necessarily have green space right there, but you may have a park a block away, why is there a requirement mandating that you have to have green space attached to your daycare? And in downtown Kalispell, we face that. Because in downtown Kalispell, down Main Street, all those businesses on even out to First, right? You still got to go down to Depot Park, or you still got to go to the courthouse, or, to those parks, or you still got to go somewhere else a long ways away. They can't have a daycare anywhere downtown. And the more I started thinking about that, it's necessarily not just protecting it, but it's also going through and making sure that the right laws are being effectively placed and not just placed in there for whatever reason. I get the green space thing, right? But I also get, in a city environment like downtown Kalispell, we're never going to have a daycare, and there's a building directly kitty corner from us right now that has a big, beautiful space that they designed for child care, and they can't use it for that because there's no grass attached to it.
I think we had some of that discussion around multifamily a number of years ago, and I think Sid, you were kind of shared with me some of the similar concern, but that sounds like an issue. It'd be interesting to hear from Jared kind of his interpretation of that, and what our code actually says, but
So it's not our code.
It's not our code, it's state law.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about state licensing on childcare to even answer any questions other than it's not a licensing through the city. It'd be a state requirement, I
There's-
suspect.
Childcare
Oh
requirement.
my God. that's-
There's like a big focus on what new law do we need. I would like to see more of an emphasis on what laws need to be struck down.
Yes.
Right? I think that is just as big of a an issue because government laws are almost exclusively put in and they're never checked to see if they're effective. Even when people feel and know that they're not rescinded. That's something I would love to take a look at, but that'll have to be for the next legislative session.
And I don't know, maybe you can add childcare in with the mental health and as a healthcare as a broader discussion on that line. I don't know.
Mental health is
Standalone.
Yeah, I'd have a
Important.
separate
That's a
bullet.
big enough one to do standalone.
But, I mean, we could have a bullet that talks about, barriers to, childcare in local communities,
There you go.
incentives
One
and
one of the
barriers.
bigger things you look at then is what are the barriers to full employment?
But,
That's big, but that is, see, because it always comes down to, well, we don't have childcare, we can't, I mean, you look at these things, there are barriers to having people fully employed. And so that there's multiple issues there that fall under that. And very broad, but these are very broad topics, but you could look at what are some of those areas that are limiting us from having our population attain full employment. Those who want full employment to attain
That's
it.
a good point.
What are the structural issues? And with childcare, it's great. We could put all these policies into place, but if you don't have someone to do it, doesn't solve any of the problems. So, I think there's a number of that, just something to think about as we get into this, when we look at that draft, but. Okay.
I'm not sure the direction being provided to me as it relates to childcare.
I think let's think
It's-
about
I was
it.
gonna say, let's,
Yeah.
Can amend it.
Chat
I mean, if you
about-
want to add something to this, like on the night, you can, I mean, this is something that probably should be well thought out and written out.
yes.
And then propose a motion to
Yeah.
add that to our list.
City of Kalispell supports
with a
legislation
prepared
that
statement or
provides
something.
for the 50% reduction of compensation to all legislators in Helena, Montana. It's old.
Okay, so I'll come back with the one addition on public,
Yes, there
or
you
on
go. Mental health.
behavioral and mental health, because that one seems pretty universal and pretty easy to punch in. And then we can build upon that as much as we want. We'll probably actually have it on next Monday night's meeting, so we'll get it all ready to go.
Okay. I think maybe too, when we have that, is it possible, Mr. Dowd, your question, it'd be really interesting to know how many units have we approved in Kalispell? And I don't know if we can get it for the county. But it'd almost be nice to have an update from planning on, because I keep seeing these buildings going up and going, when are the apartments opening? How many units are hitting the market in relatively short order? It'd just be interesting, just for information.
Yeah.
So we do provide that on a biweekly basis
Yeah,
on
but I
year to
just-
date.
Yeah, and I'm just saying
And
publicly.
and we've gotten, I think just about annually, a full update in terms of over the past X number of years.
Yeah, I'm just saying for this conversation, because I think it helps us as we look at the fact what the county's not doing. Just some of that
I
ammunition.
don't know that I'd even say that. Today I drove out by Glacier National Airport. And there's a whole new section of apartments that I didn't even, I drove through it. I was like, holy cow, there's
Just one?
100 and plus units there.
Out the
And they're
airport?
building another one right in front of it that's huge.
Well,
And then
that'd
through Evergreen. So I struggle to say that the county isn't doing
Well, but I'm
anything,
saying, what's going on?
it would be nice to know their numbers.
I don't know, if it's information.
Yeah, well, you can ask, it's a whole different component. They're not, for example, that unit is probably on septic or a community-based sewer system, so they're not gonna tell you how many,
Right.
because they don't have building permits. So they're not gonna be able to tell you how many units are there, so you're not gonna have the same comparison as you would in a municipality.
Right.
Getting back to that main question, why do some of these programs go through the county for less defined in the weeds at the state level? They say, okay, county, you distribute these funds for water and sewer projects through ARPA. And the county got X number of funds that they did distribute. And we thought we were gonna get a biosolids facility out of that, which we did not. But it makes it easier. They don't have to distribute to all the other municipalities or districts. That's why a lot of things would go through the county in respect to state programs. But we can try and see what information we can get. I don't know if we'll have much by next Monday,
That's fine.
but we can
If whatever we can.
check and
Just-
see.
So. Anything else?
From the good of the council, or?
For the good of the council, anything for the good of the council, not on the agenda.
Oh.
This is your opportunity. Oh, public comment. Okay, newspaper want to make any comment? Okay. Want to make comment? Okay, yep, thank you. Anything from the good of the council? Okay, we'll start here and go this way for once. We'll make Sid go
So,
last.
Mr. Russell, you asked me to remind you about the holiday Mondays.
Yeah, the manager's report was skipped as well, so.
Oh, well, okay, so sorry. Mayor.
Purpose.
Purpose.
So it did put an email out about the Christmas week. That is the fourth Monday. I leave it up to council if you want to have a work session on December 23rd or not.
No.
No, thank you.
Have fun with that, Chad.
I'm not voted though.
Yeah, I got a kind of a majority consensus to not have that. And that's fine. We can.
Oh, what will I do?
Thank you, Sandy.
There's got to be a basketball game on. And then what about the 30th?
It'd be fifth Monday.
Next
So we won't
Monday,
have a
so
meeting
off,
then.
okay. Just double checking.
Yep,
Thank you.
not good idea.
Oh,
too.
let's ring the year out good. Let's get all the cities and the county commissioners together. Ring the year out the right way. God,
I have naturally assumed it would be a fifth Monday, so you're more than welcome. I will be out of town.
Thank you, Mr. Russell.
You done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I'll just say, so it's this time of season where we need to be all thinking of ourselves and everyone else in Thanksgiving. So I would just, last week I had a little bit of a health scare and I broke my golden rule. And that is, if you think you're having a major health event, don't drive yourself home or to the hospital. Call the ambulance. So I will just put that out there that way. And also, as we all enjoy our time with our families, I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and remember why we're all here and what we do. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, you too.
Yeah, I was able to go and I guess I was the representative for council to go watch Glacier Wolfpack at state. They ended up losing, but they put up a good fight for Kalispell and good group of kids. So I just wanted to mention that. They put a lot of hard work into their season and this was the first time really going through and following the team and everything. It was a lot of fun. So I would recommend a lot of people do that, whether you have kids in school or not. Go watch these kids play because they put a lot of hard work into it. So
And go Cats go. You learned it in the cheers, didn't you? Cats go.
I did go to the Cat Grizz game too.
Go.
And I learned a chant.
You see the Grizz sticker on the bottom of the trophy?
Mr. Hunter?
I'll just say happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Ditto. Happy Thanksgiving.
I just am, I complained about this quite a few times, but after our last pretty much year of council meetings, I'm glad that we're back down to our regular popularity level. That's all I have.
Wait till next week.
You know, meetings have been getting kind of boring lately.
I'm not done yet.
I want the December 30 work session with all three cities in the county. No, want to you know, as you said, wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. This is one of my favorite weeks of the year, and it's important to understand that this, you know, the commitment we make, the sacrifice we make at the council, a lot of time it's focused based on family. And it's our family, and it's really everybody else in the community. But it's one of those things where I just want everybody out in the community to take a step back, not be in such a hurry. Because, you know, I've seen too many accidents of late, and I'd rather see you get to your Thanksgiving dinner late than not at all. But the council and the staff, oh, they already left. I want to wish everyone, like I said, a Thanksgiving, good Thanksgiving, and we will see you next week.
Yep.
Jeez, man. With that,